Longevity records are overrated. Yes, you heard me right. Longevity records are overrated. I know this may be a controversial statement, but I'm here to show you with some eye-popping stats that just may change your mind. It seems like there has been a lot of talk in sports today that state longevity is one of the greatest achievements a player can have. Some would also say that a player with longevity and sustained excellence for many years should somehow leapfrog them above other players that have more personal and team accolades within a shorter career. I would emphatically disagree with that statement, and I'm going to show you some examples to prove my point. We are going to look at statistics like scoring, rebounding, assists, blocks, and steals, and compare players on the all-time leader list to the per-game list of leaders to see how they compare. I think you will be shocked by what you see, and will show just how ridiculous it is to use all-time stats to determine the greatness of a player. So with that, let's get started. Scoring is one of the most important stats one can have. Since the game is decided by whichever team has the most points, you can't deny this truth. If I polled 100 people on who is the greatest scoring machine in the NBA history, what would the response be? I bet you'd hear the majority of people saying Michael Jordan and Wilt Chamberlain as the two greatest scorers in NBA history. You'd probably also hear Kobe Bryant and Kevin Durant's name thrown in by the younger crowd. Well, in fact, none of these players even make the top 3. Unless you've had your head buried in the sand lately, I'm sure that you know that LeBron James leads the all-time list with 42,184 points, with Kareem coming in second, followed by Karl Malone. LeBron may be mentioned by some as one of the greatest scorers of all time, but I highly doubt any of the 100 would say that Karl Malone is. Would you be surprised to know that Dirk Nowitzki is number 6 on the all-time scoring list? Probably not a name that even crossed your mind. So how come the names of some of the leaders on the all-time scoring list don't come to mind when asked about the greatest scorers of all time? They all have one thing in common, and do you know what that is? An extended career, which helped them pad their overall stats, thus placing them far above players that were much better than them. In fact, 4 of the top 7 all-time scoring leaders in Kareem, Karl Malone, Kobe, and Dirk failed to make the top 10 per game list. In fact, when using the per game scoring list, Malone comes in at 15, Kobe at 16, Kareem at 21st, and Nowitzki drops all the way down to the 58th spot. So maybe a better way of listing the top scoring machines in the NBA history is to use the per game list, which results in names like Jordan and Chamberlain being listed right at the top. What about rebounding? Who sits atop all the leader lists for rebounds? Names like Chamberlain and Bill Russell should be the first out of your mouth, and in this case, these two top the all-time list and also the per game list. But both these players played in the 1960s, which were greatly inflated for rebounding numbers and will likely never be matched again. So what about after these two players? Moses Malone comes in third, with Kareem landing the 4th spot. However, neither of these two crack the top 15 on the per game list, with Moses coming in at the 16th spot and Kareem dropping to the 29th spot. In fact, if you only consider the modern era of post-1980s players using the rebounds per game list, the top spot is landed by none other than the Worm, Dennis Rodman, which seems to make a lot of sense. He led the league a record-setting 7 years in a row from 1991 to 1998, averaging almost 17 rebounds per game. And this is in a league when the pace was at one of its lowest in the history of the NBA. How about assists? What anomalies can we find when comparing the all-time leaders to the per game list? The all-time list is littered with household names like Stockton, LeBron, Magic, and Andre Miller. Wait, Andre who? I actually had to look this one up, and Andre Miller played 17 seasons and averaged 6.5 assists per game, which would put him at 44th on the per game list, sandwiched between Pooh Richardson and Scott Skiles. These are names that you probably don't recognize, and that's my point. Players like LeBron and Mark Jackson notch the 4th and 6th spot respectively for the all-time list, yet fail to live up to the hype when they fall to 24th and 17th on the per game list. This can easily be summed up by Magic only being 7th on the all-time list, yet leading all players on the per game list by a wide margin. Let's turn to the defensive end to see if similar results are seen on this end of the floor, looking at steals. Jason Kidd comes in at 3rd on the all-time list, followed by Gary Payton at 5 and LeBron at 6th. Yet again, all these players drop significantly when compared to the per-game list, with Kidd dropping to 22nd, Payton dropping to 29th, and LeBron taking a complete nosedive to the 82nd spot. When you look at the per-game list, you have the top 5 players having a total of 3,936 games, which comes to an average of 787 games. MJ is the only one on the list to play more than 1,000 games. When you look at the all-time list and take out MJ, the top 5 players have an average of 1,429 games. This is almost 8 extra years these players had to rack up their steals totals. No wonder they lead the list. Isn't it better to use a per game analysis instead of heavily biased total numbers? Lastly, let's take a look at blocks. When comparing the all-time list with the per game list, this is the one that looks the most similar when comparing the top players. I'm not really sure why this would be, so leave a comment if you have any ideas. A few players that jumped out to me were Tim Duncan, who came in 6th on the all-time list, yet was 22nd on the per-game list. Robert Parrish was a part of the 1980 Celtics dynasty and played a whopping 21 years, netting him the 11th spot on the all-time list while being 70th on the per-game list. And lastly, Manute Bol, one of the best shot blockers of all time, was only 18th on the all-time list and was 2nd on the per-game list. In summary, all-time leader lists are not a good measuring bar when comparing the best players of all time. It really shows which of those players played the longest, not which one was the best. In fact, the champion of longevity, LeBron James, is near the top of the all-time list in 3 categories. He is 1st in points, 4th in assists, and 6th in steals, yet drops out of the top 5 in per-game scoring, landing at 7th. Drops out of the top 20 in assists per game, landing at 24th, and drops to a non-relevant 82nd spot in steals per game. Compare that to MJ, who only improves his ratings with landing the top spot for points per game, which shows offensive dominance, and also 4th in steals per game, showing dominance on the defensive end on the court too. To add to this, he also is 5th on the all-time scoring list and 4th on the all-time steals list, proving that his dominance was not limited to just a few peak years. If you want more reasons to crown MJ the undisputed GOAT, check out my other videos that go into more detail on his unprecedented career. Thanks for watching, and please hit the subscribe button if you want to see more videos that use real stats instead of feelings when ranking some of the all-time greats.